These should begin to look familiar. These are the threats to the covenant, which the more I read this book, the more I think that the authors chose the stories to emphasize this exact theme. When you wonder why a story like the one we just came through with Dinah and what happened at Shechem and the threat that they posed, and then Jacob leaving Canaan to get wives, and then Laban pursuing, and then the threat of Esau. When you think about all those stories, I more and more I think they're there primarily to emphasize God securing His covenant promises through in the midst of these things and showing His power, His wisdom, and so forth. Especially in a story like this one ends with basically the death of the destruction of this city, prefiguring what's going to happen in Canaan. But then you'll have these kind of happy ending, heartwarming endings to these threats, which is Hagar and Ishmael, whom God took care of when she was at her wit's end. Then you have Jacob and Esau, when Esau had vowed to kill Jacob as soon as Isaac died. And there was a third one, even Lot, the way that was worked out. Does anybody remember how the potential threat of what was the threat of Lot to the covenant promise, to the future at that point?
He was the supposed heir.
Well, he would have been. He's a competitor, right? Because he's the nephew. And it's funny with that story because in the story, what does Abraham do when he looks at the problem of all their stuff?
You choose.
He gives the choice to Lot. I mean, is he aware that, hey, Abraham, you were just promised this land. You were told to go to this land so you could inherit this land. Now you're offering it to your nephew as the solution. I mean, it's possible that his wisdom was that great that he knew that God would do this. But up to that point, there's no indication to that. He just simply says, you choose, which side do you want? So it's entirely up to God. But everybody holds their breath on the ground. And then Lot says, I'll take the east. And everybody goes, whew. And then he heads east. And then Abraham has to go save him from the east because bad things happen in the east, right? That's just how it goes. And so, just when you look at the thematic strand of the threats to the covenant all the way to the end, because remember, where does the book end geographically?
Egypt.
They're not even on the land. Not only are they in Egypt, but there are slave people in Egypt. Not only Joseph was a slave, but anybody in Joseph's group is also going to inherit that slave status. So everybody from Jacob on down inherits Joseph's slave status. So all that has to happen is exactly what gets said in Exodus. A new king arises who did not know, didn't care about what Joseph did some number of decades or centuries ago. And then here comes that slave status. They're just a slave people, which is exactly how Exodus opens.
There's just something about Egypt and Israeli relations. There's a passage, I think it's in Hosea, where he says, out of Egypt I called my son, and it's quoted in Matthew 2 regarding Jesus, whose parents went to Egypt. But also, the nation of Israel was called out of Egypt. Israel's God's son, in a sense. And Abraham was called out of Egypt. And when you look at the major prophets, all calling out oracles against nations, they deal a lot lighter with Egypt than they do with the other nations.
I was listening to Isaiah a couple days ago when I was trying to get to sleep again. The trouble with going to your phone at 3:30 in the morning to turn on the Bible is you have to look at the time.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see the time because it's very important when you can't sleep well, when you're not sleeping well, that you not look at the time when you wake up because you're setting that time and it creates anxiety. So just
I have to tell the time or else I can't get back to sleep.
Oh.
so I have been sleeping later and later and later. This morning I woke up at, which sounds early to you probably, but 5:51. But when you go to sleep, when you're asleep at 9:21, right? But off of that, why did I even,
You're listening to the Bible.
oh yeah. But in Isaiah, there's these passages about, he talking in the future tense about Egypt and Assyria being his people.
Yeah.
This grand scheme where you get these little hints about the grand scheme. But Pastor's right. Egypt figures in the plan of God in a special way. Egypt and Israel, Egyptians and Jews have a special relationship, even if they don't think of it. They might even think of it that way. And even today, they were the first nation in 1980. Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat, who was the Egyptian, is he a prime minister? I don't remember what he is. But they made peace. And they both got the Nobel Peace Prize for that. So did Jimmy Carter, because he arranged it. And then Anwar Sadat got assassinated for it.
Yeah.
So he gave his life for that. But it's not an accident that Egypt was the first nation to make peace with Israel. And even today they have Egypt, as I understand it, Egypt had notified Israel that the October 7, 2023 attacks were going to happen. And Israel ignored it. But it was the Egyptians who, so they do have a special thing. Just like the Jews and the Persians, historic friends. So that's all interesting. Nobody talks about those because they talk about the loud things like what's going on, in Lebanon with the Hezbollah or something like that, or the Hamas or something. But yeah, it's interesting with Egypt. It's just they have a special place in the history of redemption that then is also included in the New Testament, where Joseph and Mary end up in Egypt for a little while for protection. So they end up back in Egypt for protection, the place that they had to flee. Well, they didn't really flee, they got expelled. The last two times this happened, they got expelled. Abraham got expelled from Egypt, and then the Hebrews got expelled from Egypt. But in the case of Joseph and Mary, they were under the protection of the Egyptians from their own king, Herod. All right. Yeah.
Do you remember what chapter that says Egypt or Assyria will be like people over it?
Something before about 15, because I think I fell asleep somewhere around 15. That doesn't really help you. Where are we at? I'm also memorizing the order. I'm also memorizing the order of the books.
He's asking if it was Isaiah.
It is Isaiah. Let's see here. Maybe not. I know it's in Egypt. I know it's in Isaiah.
Yeah.
Somebody find it. Somebody else can find it. Maybe I dreamed it. Maybe I dreamed it while I was listening to Isaiah.
What's that?
All right. Anyway.
I just don't know exactly. After.
Okay. So we're in chapter 35, making our way, doing pretty well. We just came through the story of Dinah, which ends with this, who is the sister of which brothers? And who was their mother? Who were the other brothers of Leah? Other brothers?
Judah and Reuben.
I remember.
His mother brothers from I don't remember who the two younger brothers were. I just remember the first four were all.
Oh, I don't remember either.
children.
I don't memorize those. I shouldn't. Shame on me for not knowing them in order. Okay. So this is the way the story ends. This rhetorical question that never gets an answer. Jacob challenges his two sons because they did what they did and they took back the sister. He challenges them and they respond. It's a rhetorical, from the vantage point of the narrative, it's a rhetorical question. And whenever you see a rhetorical question, there's always an implied yes or no answer. What was I going to do? Let her, be killed? And the rhetorical answer is no. To the whole point of a rhetorical question is it doesn't need an answer because you know the answer. And so you have this rhetorical question about Dinah at the conclusion of this, after they've done what they've done and destroyed the city, and they get challenged by their father, and they say, should he treat our sister like a prostitute? It's a rhetorical question, and this question has a yes or no answer. And the narrator lets it sit as a rhetorical question. He does use the word deceitfully earlier. They answered they answered Hamor deceitfully. So yeah, you get that. But when it comes to this rhetorical question, it just kind of hangs there as the conclusion of the story. Like in the parable of the guy hires for 1 denarius in the morning and then in the middle of the day and at the end of the day. And he gives the laborers at the end of the day the same amount that he gives to the laborers at the beginning of the day, 1 denarius. And so, denarius. And they challenge him, says, hey, we work the heat of the day. And he says, well, friend, I told you what I'd give you, and I've kept my word. Am I not allowed to be generous with my money and give them what I want? Rhetorical question. That's how the parable ends. Doesn't get an answer because the answer is yes. And so here you have that kind of a rhetorical question.
Ishkar and Zebulun was the other 2 brothers.
Is it Connor who?
Ishkar and Zebulun.
Okay. Now, so that one ends, and we're on our way again. There's going to be another threat to the covenant in this chapter. So now we get a reset, and it's a very, very important chapter in the history of Israel because what's the word? It's a solemn event in in Jacob's life, in their family life, and in the history of Israel. Well, let's leave it at that. And in the history of Israel. If you wonder why Bethel was so important to the Israelites, it's right here. God said to Jacob, there's another one. Would I use this header if I was going to do this? I don't know. I don't know what header. We can decide afterwards. Well, how would you encapsulate this chapter or this section? God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau, says God. Says the God who appeared to him. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, well, let's stop right there actually first. God says, did you forget about me? Because I didn't forget about you. I have business to conduct. I made a promise to you. You made a promise to me, and it started at Bethel. So go back to Bethel, and we're going to start over. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. Wait, what? What? Put away the foreign gods that are among you, says Jacob to his family. Let us arise and go up to Bethel. Up to Bethel, that's interesting. We'll get back to that. So that I may make there an altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress. What an interesting way to describe God. The God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. Even in the midst of all of that trauma with Laban and Esau, a lot of it self-inflicted, but So they gave to Jacob, there's business to conduct on these foreign gods. The foreign gods have got to go.
Well, didn't Rachel have some?
Yes. foreign gods.
But apparently she wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
So, you know, here you have this defining moment that doesn't last all that long, when at the very beginning, monotheism is born in the history of Israel. At the same time that in this narrative, he is renamed Israel. So with the birth of a nation and the renaming to Israel, there's this explicit statement of a monotheistic devotion to the God of Abraham and Isaac on the part of Jacob. So they go together. Jacob understands that this isn't polygamy, right? I'm not adding this God to the other. This isn't, what's the word? Polytheistic. I don't know why I got polygamy, but this isn't polytheism. I'm not adding him to the pantheon like the Romans and Greeks will do, like they did in Athens, the altar to the unknown God in the midst of all the other gods. The devout, Orthodox, rabbinical, Mosaic Jew, Paul, walks into that and he's utterly offended as a devout, rabbinical, Orthodox, Mosaic Jew. It offends every sensibility he has all the way back to this moment. How can they possibly have an altar to the unknown God in the midst of altars to the host of heaven and four-footed creatures and, you know, so on and so forth? And so here you have, very understated, but part of the narrative here is, you know, if you talk about narrative theology, theology that infuses a narrative and out of which theology arises or springs or some grows or something like that, pops out. So there's a word for that. I can't remember what it is, but here's a perfect example of it. It's very understated. When he says, God says, go up to Bethel and make an altar to me. Jacob's first response is, okay, I know what this means. Put away the foreign gods from among you. He is now our God, and no God of Canaan is, and no God of Paddan Aram is. There is only Yahweh, the God of my father Abraham and my father Isaac. That's it. And so he enforces that on his whole group.
Now, that word household could extend to the servants as well.
It absolutely does, because he says, said to his household and to all who were with him. Exactly like the covenant of circumcision in Genesis 17. That was every single male, not just Isaac wasn't born yet.
Yeah.
He preceded it. So there's Ishmael and everybody else, every male servant was in on that. I'm sure they were delighted. So, you know, everybody is marked off through circumcision. And now everybody is marked off and in a sense, this is the sanctification ceremony where the entire group is separated to the worship and service of the God of Abraham and Isaac, and who will soon become, at this moment, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then that will be the formula all the way through to the New Testament. Let us arise and go up to Bethel. So let's look at this. Kind of making it up as I go along here. Let's look at Bethel. Bethel is a very, very important city. This is the land allotments as best as somebody decided them. There you can see where Simeon disappears in the middle of Judah. I think a lot of this is guesswork, but it's kind of hard to get a real sense of, you know, this defining line between Judah and Benjamin when all you get is extending from this rock to that tree. But anyway, there they are. And there's Bethel down here. And here's Ai, which we'll get back to in a second. We don't know where he is at the moment. We know that we know what just happened at Shechem, but there's gonna be, Shechem is right here. But there's gonna be an interesting, element to this, which is that he's gonna say, go up to Bethel.
It's
So-
the same as that was talks about going up to Jerusalem. Because Jerusalem was up on the mountain,
So this is,
maybe Bethel the same way.
I imagine Bethel is a mountain as well as Samaria, because that's where they put the golden calves later on.
it wouldn't even have to be a mountain. It could simply be a tell, which is
And, you know,
the way that they built these cities is they would build the reason they all look like they're on hills is because they would build the city on top of the city. So the city would go into ruins and they'd want to build on it, that site, so they'd cover it and they'd build a new city on top of it. And then they would do it again and again. And sometimes they'll actually get the destruction layer. They'll dig down on it and they'll see the destruction layer where the city got destroyed.
by hand, I mean, it's not like they had, caterpillars.
So Laish, for example, Lachish, I think it was, the second city to Jerusalem that the Assyrians couldn't conquer. They have that site, and that's the same, that's a tell, where it's city on top of city, and they dig down through the layers and they can actually see, you're actually going back in time in these layers. But that's probably, my hunch is that's what's going on here. We don't know that he's at Shechem at this point. But they didn't seem to reference up and down based on geography like Westerners do, like we would. You know, we're gonna go down to Jackson and up to Sault Ste. Marie. We're not gonna say we're gonna go up to Jackson, even if Jackson is on a mountain. We wouldn't, not how it works. Neither would we say we're gonna go,
Is that an American thing?
I don't know.
Animals?
So that's the thing. Here's Bethel, here's Shechem, kind of wandering around in Canaan. This is all Canaan to the west of the Jordan River right here for the time being. But that's the mandate, verse 4. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods that they had. This is interesting. This is remarkably detailed. And the rings that were in their ears. I don't know. Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem.
So they were still in the Shechem area.
Yeah. So they're leaving a place that was a threat to the covenant that's steeped in idolatry, and that's utterly Canaanite. They walk away from that, but they are going to leave with their foreign gods, some of which they may have gotten from the people that they captured from Shechem. Nope, stop right there. You're moving away from this place, Shechem, and all of its associations, and you're going back to the starting point, origins. Genesis chapter 12. The Lord said to Yahweh, by the way, right there, Abram, go from your country. He's in Haran, where Jacob just came from, or not far from. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. That land is going to be Canaan. So he heads south. And immediately within 8 verses, there's the Shechem. Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. This is all set up for later, like, for example, the last chapter we just came through. And from there, he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai, on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. So that's the first altar built by the people of God after they are given the promise of the land.
And after, Jake was actually following the same path up to this point. He goes to Shechem.
And then he goes back to, yep. It's it doesn't repeat, it rhymes. You'll see it shadowy reflections of what's already happened and prefiguring what's going to happen, like we saw with the destruction of the people of Shechem and the threat of intermarriage and so forth.
But wrestled with, the angel.
Yep, and he's gonna mention that in a minute, yep. That was the place that he stayed at just before he left Canaan, when he was fleeing from Esau, where God appeared to him.
Yeah, Jacob's ladder.
And then, now it's this date with destiny. That was where the promise was made by God. And that's where the promise was made by the commitment, whatever you want to call it, by Jacob. And they had a little covenant. And he was, then he was on his way out. I don't know where he got, where did he wrestle? It doesn't matter.
On the way down, I'm not sure it was in Canada yet.
From there to the hill country east, so he's between Bethel and Ai. So here's Bethel, and here's Ai just to the east. Ai will be the city during the conquest that they can't seem to conquer. And they get run back by God. And they take losses. And then eventually, this is under Joshua, eventually they take the city and do what they do on a really smart, we talked guerrilla warfare last week. And that's how they took, that the Israelis of today practice, and that others do too. But that happened here too, where they convinced, how did they convince the people of Ai to come out and fight them? And then they snuck around behind them and burned the city.
Came up to Joshua, the group that came up that, when they came out, they ran.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Like they did the first time when they went there.
Yeah.
About 32 men and.
Yeah, then they burned the city and took it. But yeah, this is central to the story of Israel right here. And so he's told to go to Bethel.
We wrestled, looks like near Mahanaim.
That's on the east side of the Jordan. Let's see. Interesting that he calls himself, where does he do that? Let's see. We're in the wrong chapter. I got a couple more verses to talk about, a couple more instances where Bethel appears in the history of Israel. Let's see. Where does he call himself the God of Bethel?
Well, it must be later on in the text.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Oh, 31:13. Why don't I read my
Oh,
note?
that's leading up to the wrestling match.
I already highlighted it. I am the God of Bethel. When he's going to call him back out of Paddan Aram, he's the God of Bethel. Reaches out of Bethel and out of Canaan and into Paddan Aram. These people believed in a local kind of territorial concept of a deity, which is why the Egyptians wanted the Hebrews out of Egypt, because when they leave Egypt, that meddlesome God, Yahweh, will go with them. And they were exactly right. God is saying, the God of the desert is saying, yeah, if you want me out of your business, you're going to let this people go. Oh, you don't want to let them go? Okay, let's try again. Oh, you don't want to let them go? Let's try again 10 times. Then they say, okay, we're going to let them go so we can get rid of this God. Otherwise, as the Egyptians said, we will all be dead. So then they leave. That God then, from their perspective, disappears into the desert where he belongs. And off they go. I was just thinking of another example. Oh, the cart, the story of Dagon, and the story of the Philistine attack on Israel during in chapter 5 of 1 Samuel, when they get defeated and they take the Ark of the Covenant from the Israelites, their God. They take the God of the Israelites, this is how they think of it, and they put him in the temple of Dagon, in what they think of as a submissive position beneath their god Dagon. And they wake up in the morning, and Dagon has fallen down.
He's prostrate before Israel's gods.
You know what? Let's waste time.
Yeah.
That story is, it's so thick with with sarcasm, acidic sarcasm, maybe more, almost more than any other story, where you did the narrator's obviously mocking their whole understanding of gods. Yeah, Philistines took the ark of God, brought it into the house of Dagon, and set it up beside Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next morning, behold, exclamation point. That's how they do exclamation points. Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon. Remember, this is supposed to be their great God that they have to now pick up themselves because he can't seem to get up. So they took Dagon, their great God, and put him back in his place. But when they arose early on the next morning, behold, exclamation point. Dagon had fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. Repeat. And the head of that sarcasm, the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. And it's this pathetic picture of an impotent, vain God. And really the people who made him. And just the powerlessness, impotence of this
And
deity.
what did they take from that? Okay, let's not spread on the threshold when we go in there.
Yeah. So now what do? Now they take the ark of God and they send it to another city. And plagues break out on that city. So that city sends it to this city. And this plagues break out on this city. And finally they say, we got to get rid of this God. Ever since we brought this God into our land, he's been unhappy with us. So we need to get him back in his land. So they put him on a cart with 2 cows that apparently, I think the meaning is that haven't ever been trained to go anywhere. So they don't have any, others would know better, but I think these animals get you like these horses that you can get on the horses and like the trail horses and you ride. They just know the trail. You wouldn't have to be with them. The horse would know to come back because he's done this so many times. So these cows hadn't gone through that. So they had no particular, leanings either way. And so they put it on the road on this cart and they just set it off northeast towards Beth Shemesh. And you can just see it like trying to get rid of a dog. Shoot, go, like that. And the cart set, the cows set off and it ends up in Beth Shemesh where there's also going to be a plague because they don't know what to do with the thing either. Beth Shemesh is Israel. So they go and get the Levites from, is it Jabesh Gilead? I don't remember.
I think
Hey, Levites, can you come and get this thing? Because we don't really know what to do with it. And it's causing a lot of trouble like it did among the Philistines. So then the Levites comes, all right, we'll take it. So they come and take the ark and do the right thing with it. And it finally goes away and everybody breathes a sigh of relief, But that's the story of territorial gods.
the intriguing thing there is, of course, God was in control of sponsoring all these events. And, God was showing that he's more powerful than their gods who are no gods.
Yeah, we talked about fourth generation warfare last week, where you move from nation state warfare, where the nations have a monopoly on the means of war. With the birth of nation state, I think in the 1600s, with Treaty of Westphalia, and that was true until recently. And whoever controlled the front could then push the front towards the enemy and win, like World War II. But now we've moved into this fourth generation warfare, that would be third generation, where non-nation actors can reach behind a line and damage you and hurt you. And we talked about the pager incident. But man, anybody who thought, these people think that the war between the gods is third generation, where there's a front. And you just got to get the God, as long as the God is on the other side of in his territory, on the other side of the front, you're safe. Yahweh's a fourth generation God.
Mm-hmm.
He'd reach into Egypt, do anything he wants. He'd reach into the land of the Philistines, do anything he wants. That's God. That's the creator. He honors no front. He has no such constraints. They didn't understand that. That would be my psalm. I would do something like that if I was going to do a psalm in 2025. All right. Okay, I don't think I have any. So that's, I think this section right here is far more significant than than is commonly understood based on what happens, but it's a return to origins. And when he goes back to Bethel, he's renewing not just the worship of, he's renewing not just the covenant, if you want to call it that, that was made between God and Jacob. And when God made that covenant between himself and Jacob, he was making it with all of Jacob's descendants throughout all time, whether they liked it or not. And the Israelites will, and the Hebrews will not like it when they get out into the desert. And then eventually, in Numbers 14, they will launch what amounts to virtually a mutiny against Moses and Aaron, and then God will intervene, basically to save Moses and Aaron, because I think they would have executed them and headed back to Egypt, and that was not an option. But so this is a covenant throughout all time. And now with the return to Bethel, you're now renewing that covenant, and with it, you're renewing and consecrating the people of God themselves. It's a consecration ceremony. And part of it is put away the foreign gods, signaled by put away the foreign gods from among you. And in my mind, that's the significance of this story in the book of Genesis. It's another example of origins, beginnings. Only in this case, it's a return to origins. So Bethel, first place where Abraham built an altar to God that we know of. Although my hunch is that's an argument from the silence. Just because the Bible doesn't say that something happened doesn't mean it didn't happen. See if you can figure that out. So what's the place of Bethel? What happened to Bethel, this city of origins, birth of the monotheistic worship of the God of Israel? Well, as I've said, Bethel turned into a center of idolatry when the kingdom of Israel, the United Kingdom, split after the death of Solomon, and you had the 10 northern tribes, kingdom of Israel, and 2 southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, the kingdom of Judah. And the northern kingdom of Israel immediately collapsed into idolatry and never recovered. There's 19 or 20 kings, northern kings mentioned in 2nd Chronicles, and I forget, it'd be, well, the kings in the Chronicles. There are 19 or 20 northern kings. Not a one of them is said to be good. Every one of them, he did evil. In the south, there's going to be, I think, 6 of them where he says he was good. Josiah, Hezekiah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, a couple others. But so what happened to Bethel? After all those years of idolatry, it was set up as a center of idolatry by Jeroboam, alongside of Dan in the north. And then finally, in the 700s, the northern kingdom will fall to the Assyrians in 722, be completely destroyed, and the survivors will be carted off to the northeast, to Nineveh or wherever they took them, where they will now be in exile. And they will be recipients of their remnant, their survivors who stayed in exile, would eventually be the recipients of, for example, the 1 Peter. Why not? Let's waste more time. Where you're going to see this kind of thing. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who are the elect exiles of the dispersion, Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, which are those Roman provinces to the north of Israel, Judea and Samaria to the north and northwest, like this. where Paul, well, actually, he doesn't go there. He goes to Galatia, but he goes to Galatia and Asia, but he didn't go to the rest of them that we know of. But anyway, that's where they are. Hundreds and thousands, no, 700 years later, that's where they're going to end up. And they have a date with destiny, their survivors do, because Peter's going to write letters to those who became Christians among them. That's the dispersion, the diaspora. They will be joined by the southern kingdom, the remnant of the southern kingdom of Judah in 587 BC, when the Babylonians will destroy the southern kingdom and Jerusalem and the temple and cart the survivors away into exile, also to the east.
In Bethel and Samaria, I think was the other mountain where they set up the golden calves. Technically, it was the perverted Jehovah worship or Yahweh worship. I mean, they said this is where we're going to worship Yahweh, but they added these cows to it because they didn't want people to continue to go down to Jerusalem.
Yeah, that was Jeroboam.
That was Jeroboam.
He was savvy in his own evil way.
But then other kings, such as Ahab, brought in other gods.
So what you'd have then, by the time of Jesus, Samaria would not have been a population of returned Jews. They would simply be the peoples who settled there, who came in, immigrated there, exactly like what we call Palestinians, which is a collection of peoples, a lot of them the remnant of the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire, who came in after about World War I till World War II, and it's almost exactly the same thing. But back then you'd have these peoples in Samaria that would then worship syncretistically, combining together to worship these various gods. And there would have been a remnant of Yahweh worship in that time. And so what you have then, which is why the Jews in Judea hated them, this perversion of the worship of Yahweh in Samaria. Okay. So there's your threat to the covenant. We talked about these. We've been talking about these right here, these threats. So this is where we've gotten so far. We just dodged a bullet with Shechem, near assimilation, or what looked like was going to be assimilation. And then potentially the people of Shechem, the people of the land, realize what they've done, and they go and they exterminate this new tribe, Jacobites, or whatever you want to call them. But that doesn't happen. But now, in chapter 35, we have another potential threat to the covenant, which has to get taken care of, which is idolatry. Doesn't get bigger than that. Put away the foreign gods from among you. The enemy is within the gates. The enemy has infiltrated and permeated the people. And the enemy is idol worship, which will destroy the people of God as quickly as anything else will. And so that gets taken care of, or so you think. But there's another threat to the covenant that's kind of understated. Now we can move on a little bit. 13. God appeared to Jacob again when he had come from Paddan Aram and blessed him. And God said to him, he gets a lot of appearances. How many times has God appeared to Jacob? 5, 6? I don't know. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be Jacob, which is weird. Your name was Jacob. Now it no longer will be Jacob, but Israel shall be your name, which already happened once during the wrestling match. He comes from Paddan Aram, he goes to Bethel, he gets renamed. Now he moves. He's in Shechem, or near Shechem. Now he gets told to go back to Bethel. So he goes back to Bethel. And the place where he got renamed to Israel the first time, now in this sort of renewal, he gets named again to Israel. Which, okay, that's the story. So it's this twice renaming of Jacob. So he called his name Israel. And God said to him, you get the sense of the importance of being called Israel. it's really emphasized in the life of Jacob. I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. You have this covenant renewal that is now under almost like a divine creation mandate. Be fruitful and multiply, but not generally for the created order, but for the next part of the promise, which is a company of nations shall come from you. As you multiply, I will fulfill in you this promise that I'm making to you right now. And the Egyptians will have to deal with that, because no matter what they do, they can't seem to stop this. They can't seem to stop this people from breeding. And kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you. So we have worship renewal, covenant renewal with Jacob's covenant with God. And now we have promise renewal, the extension of the promise from Abraham to Isaac and now to Jacob. It's basically the same thing, right? If you go back and look at chapter 12, which we're not going to bother this time, all the promises that were made to Abraham are now transferred, which already have been, but here they are again in this renewal ceremony transferred to Isaac or to Jacob. Then God went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him. So not a dream. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone. He poured out a drink offering on it and poured oil on it, commemoration ceremony, and initiation ceremony of some kind. So Jacob called the name of the place where God had spoken with him, Bethel. And so we have this place name. We have the origin story includes within it the commemorative renaming of what was Luz, now becomes Bethel. Most holy and venerated city location in Israel other than Jerusalem, maybe, which will then become utterly defiled like Shiloh and become a center of idolatry, which God will then destroy. So what happened to Bethel? We'll close with this. What happened to Bethel? Where does Bethel figure 1,200 years later? After it's been steeped in idolatry for 150 years, center of idolatry for 150 years, formal center of idolatry for 150 years. This is God's prophecy through Amos to Israel, to the northern kingdom. Come to Bethel and transgress. To Gilgal, I don't know where that is, and multiply transgression. Bring your sacrifices every morning, your tithes every 3 days. There's no 3-day tithe required that I remember in the law. Offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving of that which is leavened. What kind of sacrifices are they supposed to offer? Unleavened. Proclaim free will offerings, publish them, for so you love to do, O people of Israel, declares the Lord God. And now I think this is one of the most chilling, haunting prophecies and warnings in the entire Bible. They've already had it tough. I gave you cleanness of teeth in all your cities, hunger, and lack of bread in all your places, yet you did not return to me, declares the Lord. I withheld the rain from you when there were yet 3 months to the harvest. I would send rain on one city and send no rain on another city. One field would have rain, and on the field on which it did not rain would wither. So 2 or 3 cities would wander to another city to drink water and would not be satisfied. Yet you did not return to me, declares the Lord. I struck you with blight and mildew, your many gardens and your vineyards, your fig trees and your olive trees, the locusts devoured, like Egypt. Yet you did not return to me, declares the Lord. I sent among you a pestilence after the manner of Egypt. I killed your young men with the sword. I carried away your horses, and I made the stench of your camp go up into your nostrils. Yet you did not return to me, declares the Lord. I overthrew you as when I overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, and you were as a brand plucked out of the burning. yet you did not return to me, declares the Lord. Therefore, this is what I will do to you, O Israel. Because I will do this to you, prepare to meet your God, O Israel. So from this commemorative event, origin story, covenant renewal at Bethel, at the birth of the nation, in Bethel, to this judgment, which is headed by the idolatry that is going on in Bethel. That's a remarkable arc for a city, this little city. So that's
One of the places that Jeroboam put the golden calf.
yeah,
So Israel didn't have to go down to Jerusalem to worship.
Bethel and Dan, one in the north, one in the south, or one in the south, one in the north. So that's the sad epitaph on Bethel, and then it disappears. Okay, we'll go ahead and stop there. I thought it was worth, really unpacking this underappreciated story of origins and covenant renewal and kind of the birth of monotheism, in a sense. We'll go ahead and stop there.